The next team up is the Dallas Mavericks. The X factor to me, there are a lot of good ways to go here. And this is definitely the most established player that I think either of us has. My X factor is Klay Thompson. And it's just, I'm not going to, belabor the suspense. And it's fairly straightforward. I think his ability to, like Nico Harrison, I think, I forget who, I think it was Zach Harper mentioned of The Athletic that he talked to Nico Harrison over the summer and Nico Harrison thought like, we're a Klay away is the quote, from being a real title threat or getting over the hump. And so that's kind of true and kind of not. Like you are on certain nights, you're a Klay away, and on certain nights, like Klay is in the way. So like, I think if he can give Dallas more nights that look like the opener, where quick catch and shoot threes, not a lot of dribbling, active defensively, certainly put on matchups that he can handle and not asked to do too much. Like, yeah, that's a piece right there that like makes a difference. All the stuff we've talked about since he signed there, just an outlet in the corner. That's not like PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr. last year. It's like defenses are happy if that shot is being taken by those guys. It's an emergency if Klay Thompson is getting that like shot diet in a playoff series. So you got the upside there. The downside is like the injuries are what they've been. He had brutal stretches last year, forcing shots, like total inability to guard anything. Like that's going to happen. Like those nights will appear this year. And the expectation given his age is that there might be more of them. But if Dallas can just get the best out of him as often as possible, he's just a game-changing offensive piece there. Like you can't overstate the potential impact of a guy that like gets the full defensive focus when he's hot, and that plays on a team with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. Like that fundamentally changes what Dallas can do.
I'm with you. What do you think that in what ways are they better built to insulate him defensively than the Warriors were? Because I saw a lot of that where it was, Klay was active. Look at the steals he had in game one. But to me, I view it as, yes, they had Draymond Green, but inconsistently, when you look at his availability, the Mavericks are just bigger. Yes. They are huge, and it feels like they are better built than the Warriors to manipulate the type of matchups and responsibilities that Klay is going to take on. And they also are, maybe this year's version of the Warriors would have been fine to insulate him. But when you look at, teams will target Klay. Mavericks are going to like try and switch out of those actions well before it ever happens. And they have experience doing that. So that's why I don't know if he'll be a good defender. They don't need him to be a good defender. They just need him to not be a train wreck. And they are built to make it so that he's not a train wreck. And so I guess I might be overcorrecting too, because it felt like there were corners of the internet that wanted us to believe that Klay Thompson was basically a minimum contract addition that the Mavericks overpaid. And it's no, like this dude has real value on the offensive end, and you put him in a different environment, he's probably going to buy into this offensive role more than he would have with the Dubs, or maybe he would have bought in if the contract wasn't a concern. Who knows? I just find kind of the perception of Klay Thompson now very fascinating.
I mean, look, if you saw him on the wrong nights last season, you could be persuaded like this guy is just not a helpful player anymore, because that was the case. But just the context in Dallas is so different. Like they can put so much size on the floor around him that even if he is being targeted, there's just more length just all over to just like clean up if he does get blown by or whatever. And just offensively too, it's like the distinction in Dallas is that like you have an ace on the ball playmaker, maybe two, and you have guys that are just awesome roll men, which suck the defense in. And like, you don't really have any of that. Not Curry's just a different kind of first option, and they had no role guys. So it's just, he's way better positioned to succeed on both ends. But it's not guaranteed because of the age and the injuries and the lack of discipline in shot selection sometimes.
I have one question.
Yeah.
On this before we move on. Did you give any consideration to Quentin Grimes?
I mean, a little bit. It's just because, like, well, we talked about what a steal that seems like. I would put him a little bit behind. Like, I think even like Jaden Hardy might be more of an X factor for me, just because the ball handling and stuff like that. But Grimes, I mean, I don't know. Grimes just feels like it's unfair that they were able to get him. I don't know what I think about his X factor case. All right, Denver Nuggets are the next team. Man, unfortunately there's like a few too many guys, because the thinking is that like we've had a little bit of a talent suck lately. Last 2 off seasons, we've lost key guys. Jamal Murray does not look like Jamal Murray anymore, at least to start the season. For me, it's still Christian Braun, and it's a pretty straightforward case. Like, he is going to need to prove that he can scare defenses with the 3-point shot. While like, I think the opener against OKC was like a really good distillation of like sort of what you're getting and why that is. It's just such an X factor. Like, he didn't make a three. He passed up some threes. He wasn't getting guarded at all. And that's a huge problem, but he was still awesome as a cutter and in the open floor, and like defends his ass off and plays hard and like does so many good things that I guess against the right teams, maybe that just outweighs the shooting questions, but he's just going to have to make shots. Like I mean, the Nuggets fancy themselves a title contender. I think that's realistic. Like, he can't play big minutes in the finals, I don't think. And like, I guess he did play. He's done that before, but that's on a version of the Nuggets with Bruce Brown and KCP. Like, now it's just the stakes are higher and there's no safety net. Like, he just has to be that guy, and I don't know if he can.
It comes back to, for me, because when you look at just the off-ball movement and the defense, I think really to open up against OKC, I thought he did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
But it sucks that that we're oversimplifying it, but I don't think that it is an oversimplification of he needs to take threes. He needs to make some of them. And to me, it's not about, oh, can he play heavy minutes in the finals? It's if you have KCP and Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray, and there are just 3 guys that you can count on getting up a reasonable to an above average to a lot of threes, it becomes easier to kind of like plug and plop some of these other dudes in there. But when you're dealing with like no KCP, and if you're also going to have like if Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are closer to their normals right now than not, now it's a real problem. And so you're trying to sprinkle in, well, Peyton Watson, we don't want Russ necessarily taking threes, even though he's going to have to take some of them. You get to a point where it's, well, how reliant do we need to become on Julian Strawther? I might have actually picked him for that reason, because I remain so concerned about Denver's overall 3-point volume. I guess you have to trust that, like, I've said this before, like Michael Porter Jr. is the streakiest all-time great shooter in the history of the NBA, right? Like, he seems like he has more of those super cold nights than any all-time great shooter that I could remember. Is that accurate?
No, he this is annoying. He has the most stretches of time where it's like, that's going in. I have no doubt that like the second he shoots out, that's good. And that'll be true for like entire quarters. And then there are other times where it's like, that's got no chance, which is just like not how you should feel about someone with like, he's over 40% for his career. Like I'm pretty sure. And he's just like lights out, but yeah, the streakiness is kind of funny. Strawther, man, I guess like his role's similarly like elevated because you've just pulled Christian Braun off of a bench unit that was like not good last year, and the early returns suggest the Nuggets bench might be even worse now because you promoted someone who was like one of the few guys that was a plus there before. So I don't know, double X factor. Strawther's there too.
You could make Russ the X factor just for many different reasons too. Can he help that bench? Is he going to be more detrimental than not? I think here's my spicy take. I like, to be clear, I would have went with Strawther. You could have went with Jamal Murray.
Oh man, yeah, that's a bad thing. You really
right. Are we back to me? Oh my god, we're back to me again. We're on to the Detroit Pistons. I'm curious to see where you would have went here, but for Detroit, I wound up selecting Jaden Ivey. This in theory should be too high profile because I think if you look at just the draft statuses and what he was supposed to be, he should be the second most important player in the building, no lower than third. And we kind of just don't know what he is at this point, which is part of the problem. He is starting. So Monty Williams, that didn't stick. I mean, he'd started a bunch of games last year too, but whatever. Anyway, Killian Hayes out of the NBA now too. That's rough stuff. Anyhow, so the X factor stuff for him is, can he play alongside Cade Cunningham in a way that just makes sense and be efficient while doing it? What I saw in his first game of the season, this is someone who feels like he's very much more active away from the ball. They had him moving in from the corners. Defenses still do not care about him from beyond the arc, though, and that's going to need to change. He did have some just nifty off the dribble plays. The vision is there. I'm just curious to see, like, can it all come together? Where it's like, even, okay, he's putting pressure on the rim, but he ends up 4 of 7 at the rim. And some of those were difficult finishes, but statistically, like 4 of 7 at the rim is kind of also ran. Like, it's not something that's going to stand out. And can you be the best or optimal version of Jaden Ivey while you're not necessarily the primary person with the ball for a lot of your minutes because Cade Cunningham exists? And spoiler alert, Cade Cunningham fucking rules. That dude doesn't look just ready to make an all-star team. He looks ready to contend for all NBA teams. He won't, because the Pistons aren't going to play enough meaningful games for people to watch him. And they might not even play enough meaningful games for him to meet the games threshold. He might get shut down at some point. He's been paid. But like, Jaden Ivey is kind of just, he's a barometer for, well, where are the Pistons headed to? So based off how this comes together this year, I would say, or maybe even by the trade deadline, you kind of have a feeling for like, well, how are we going to then use Ron Holland, or if he's healthy enough, Asar Thompson? We're still waiting on word with when Asar Thompson is going to come back. So the stakes are high when it comes. I mean, it often is when you don't know enough about a player when he's coming into year 3, but I like the energy that I saw from him both on and off the ball so far. But is it going to come together in an efficient package that makes enough sense for the Pistons to say, okay, we are moving forward with this Cunningham-Ivey dynamic?
Yeah, the shooting, which informs like how viable he is with Cade, is like the immediate thing. But when I was talking in the intro about like some of these guys are going to have like long-term implications for I was looking at Ivey's name as I was saying that, just because like, well, he's either the guy next to Cade or you're still looking for that guy. And maybe that guy's on the roster. Maybe that is Ron Holland if the shot starts to fall, or, it's probably like Asar Thompson is just, I hope he plays soon, or I hope we find out like what's going on soon. But he's not a 2, I don't think. So Ivey just is the guy of like, okay. And this feels like this is the year too, right? Where it's like, he's either going to show us that he's a fit or not, because we've stripped away the bad coach that didn't trust him. We've surrounded him with more shooting. Like, he's deep enough in his career where if there's going to be improvement, you would expect to see it. So he's like the long-term X factor, I think, too, because you just don't know if he's going to be, in that starting lineup next to Cunningham for 7-8 years or not.
And I will say, based off what we've seen so far this year, and even during preseason, I'm more confident that it would work out than I was before. Too much of it kind of rides on, well, how is he going to be guarded without the ball? But the way he's moving without it, and if you're able to put, like, he had 9 free throw attempts in the opening game. And it's like, if you're able to generate that type of opportunity while you're not necessarily your team's primary ball handler, like that, I feel really good about that. And then there's still just like the element of the passes he could make, or like once he leaves his feet, you don't know what's going to happen in a good way. So I'm more optimistic than I was a few months ago, if that's any consolation to anybody, and it might not be.
I mean, it would be hard to have been less optimistic too. I mean, because it was looking rough.